So, I watched a video recently by Toman Synthesizers called Don't Create Music, Create Sounds. The idea behind the video is that you should allocate a fair amount of your creative time doing sessions where you sit down and you just write a loop or you just do sound design. I've been wanting to do this for a little while, so I decided to give it a shot over the last couple weeks, having sessions where I would just write top loops instead of write tracks. And it went really well. It was actually like a really cool process that I'm probably going to employ a lot in my music creation process in the future. And I noticed a couple like cool benefits of doing it this way. First, it takes some of the pressure off of your session where you don't have it in your head that what you're writing eventually needs to be like a banger track. You're just like, this loop needs to sound good, which is a much smaller hill to climb. The other cool result of this process is building a library of loops and sounds that you can draw from later. This will help speed up your songwriting process when you are actually sitting down to write entire tracks. And having a library of well-crafted original loops to pull from will likely make your full songs sound a lot better in the long run. So anyway, I thought I would share a handful of loops I made to convey some of my creative process. Hopefully you can get some ideas from it. Take what I'm doing and experiment with it. So let's get into some of the loops that I made over the last 2 weeks. Okay, so this is what the first loop sounds like. Okay, so I'm going to get started with this drum rack, and it is full of kind of weird, woody, different sounding percussion hits. I'm actually going to use this for most of the loops I make. So I think I just went on Splice and I searched for techno percussion, and then I filled up the rack with those good sounding hits that I found. Okay, so I'm going to start by dropping in an MDD snake and generating some random patterns with it. Okay, so I'll go with that one. Next, I'm going to add a random MIDI effect to alter about 25-30% of the hits to random. Except I want to keep that first percussion sound that begins the beginning of each measure. So I'm just going to automate this random device to only be on or to turn off for the first hit of every measure. Like so. Okay, now I want to get some more rhythm in here, so I'm going to add in a hi-hat. Okay, that kind of gels, except I want to take some of the lows out of it. Take out about up to 240. That works for now. And then I'm going to put a kick in as well for a similar thing, like a downbeat, added rhythm. Let's put in a little offbeat too. Okay, except this is a top loop, so I'm going to take all the lows out of that. A little bit of the high too. Then I'm also going to add in a drum bus to bring some volume back into the mix on that kick, since I took so much of the low out. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so now I'm going to do some group processing. So I'm going to select all three of these channels, the percussion, the hi-hats, and the kicks, and hit Control-G or Command-G if you're on a Mac to put them into a group. And then I'm going to start with some saturation and grab the preset a bit warmer. This kind of brightens the sound up. I think group processing is really important for tops because you want them to sound like they're in the same room and all part of the same thing. So you got to find ways to glue them together. Next, I'm going to add a Valhalla Freak Echo, which is a free delay plugin from Valhalla. Bring the mix down super low, 2 or 3%. I'm going to set the delay to 1/8. Bring the shift up to about 50 hertz. Take some of the lows out. Super subtle, but it adds a little bit of character to it. Okay, now I'm going to add in Tantra. Sorry if my video starts to glitch. The Tantra interface does that. I'm going to grab a Scorpio filter. I'm going to take the delay out of both the A and the B pages. And I'm going to bring the mix down to maybe 50-ish. I like what it's doing to that first hit, but it's a little bit much. So I'm going to modulate it in and out using an LFO. So let's map the LFO to the mix, change the bottom percent to 5 and the top to 30, change the rate to 2 beats. So that Tantra is kind of coming and going. And yeah, there you have it. That is beat number 1. Throw a pad in there really quick. And then you can just mix that down to audio and have it for when you want to drop it into a track as a top, and also save your project file. And that way, when you put it in as a top and you like it in the track, you can have the individual pieces saved so you can modify elements over time, stuff like that. Okay, so this is what the second loop came out sounding like. So I'm going to start with the same drum rack full of techno percussion that I did in the last loop. But this time, instead of putting in an MDD snake to generate a random MIDI, I'm just going to find some sounds that I like. Okay, so I'm going to record that in. Now I'm just going to get a little bit more in there. Okay, it sounds good. Then I'm going to drop a randomizer in these as well. Get it to about 30% chance. So it keeps the original idea, but it has some variation. Then you get some like fun surprises that way. Okay, so now I want to get a shaker sound in here. So I'm going to go into my library and just grab like a default shaker that I made in the machine software. But I only want the third shaker to hit, so I'm going to automate the clip volume. Okay, that sounds good. Now I'm going to do some group processing. So I'm going to group these into a group, and I'm going to start with just a gentle delay using the Valhalla Supermassive. It's another free Valhalla reverb and delay effect. Going to set it to 1/8 note, bring the mix down to 18, 20, bring the feedback down to about 20%, take the lows out. I like Valhalla Supermassive and Freak Echo just because they give you a good amount of variation options, so you get different sounds than you do out of the Ableton defaults. So next, let's put a shifter on it and change it to ring mod. Bring the coarse up to about 2.15 kilohertz. Bring the dry wet down on that. Okay, so let's modulate both the dry wet and the LFO amount using an LFO. So let's set the rate to 2 beats and start by mapping it to the LFO amount. And then let's invert the percentages with the left percentage is 100 and the right percentage is 0. And then we're going to do the dry wet amount as an inversion of that. So we'll do the low as 15% and the high as 60%. And that way, when the LFO is at the highest amount, it's at a relatively low amount of dry wet and vice versa. Okay, and then finally, let's do one more thing. Let's go ahead and mix this down to an audio. So let's take an audio track and set the group channel to the input and record it into that track. Okay, now let's take that audio and go to the transient warping section and change the preserve to 16th notes, change the loop type to no loop, and bring the transient size down to 25. And then let's consolidate the track, and then normalize the volume, and let's drop in a pad, and you've got your second loop. Okay, so for this third loop, I went for more of like a normal-ish, like tech house breakbeat sounding top, and it came out sounding like this. So instead of starting with some weird techno perks like I have on the others, I just started with straight up hi-hat for this, kind of like a jumpy line. And I put in some swing, about 57. Then let's put in a shaker. So I'm just going to take a regular hi-hat and bring the attack up to give it a shaker sound, about to maybe 65, 80, somewhere in there. And then I'm going to drop it in kind of intermittently, feel it with the groove. Then I'm going to get some offbeat snares in here. Sounds about right. Get the groove on there. Let's get a clap in here now. Okay, now I'm going to vary up the hi-hats a little bit to make them a little bouncier and get some depth in them because they're just really flat right now. So let's get a different hi-hat for some of these hits. And then let's switch up the velocity on some of the hits as well. Okay, and then let's also get an open hi-hat in here to add some more depth. Open up that first one. Okay, that sounded nice and groovy as a start. Let's do some group processing. So I'm going to put a little reverb on the whole group. All right, so let's bring in the Valhalla Supermassive to do a little like just fattening reverb. Not like a reverb, but it just fattens up the sound a little bit. So let's grab the preset Cirrus Minor Plate. Bring the feedback down to 10-ish. Bring the delay down to about 15 milliseconds. Bring the mix down to about 25, 30. Okay, it just fattens it up a little bit. Okay, then we're going to put a saturator on top of that. We'll do a bit warmer again, except we'll just do 1 decibel of drive instead of 6. Okay, and then finally, let's add another Valhalla reverb to the full group processing. And then grab the splashy space preset in small reverbs. Bring the feedback down to about 16, 15. Bring the mix down a lot. It's nice. Okay, and then finally, let's put some processing on just the hats to just fatten them up a little bit. Like, it's hard to get hats to sound fat. So let's process these motherfuckers. Let's actually put the hat and the shaker in their own group. So just select those two, Control G. I'm going to change the color and call it hats. Okay, so let's put another freak echo on them to try and fatten them up. Okay, change the mix down to about 35. Change the shift all the way down, and let's hear how that sounds. Okay, it just gives them like a tiny bit of chunk. Let's see how it sounds in the whole mix. Yeah, that's not bad. I think that's a good kind of breakbeaty, tech housey spoople. Okay, then I want to get some, just like a little Wompy bass hit to kind of cap this off. So I'm going to go into my Wompy bass folder, Wompy bass one shots. Yeah, those sound good. Let's try those guys out. And then let's just write in a couple hits. Let's actually bring the release down first, because I want them to be a little choppy. Sounds sick. Now I think we just need to take the lows out of those. Dope. Okay, let's add in a pad, and here's our third loop. Okay, so let's make one more loop. This is what the last loop came out sounding like. Okay, so for this one, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the techno percussion drum rack again. And I'll go the MDD snake route. Toss in an MDD snake until I get a dope loop. Okay, I'm gonna stick with that one. Okay, then I'm gonna start processing this. Let's start with an overdrive. I'm going to put an LFO on the filter frequency and the filter width of the overdrive to give it kind of a swishy sound. Let's set the rate to 3/16 and then map it to the frequency, and then open up the multiple mapping page and map the second one to the width. Okay, then next let's put a quick delay on that to add like a metallic effect. Switch the format to time instead of sync. Bring it down to about 8 milliseconds. Bring the filter up to a high pass. And then let's add a little bit of delay to that with a Valhalla Freak Echo. Set the mix kind of low, 10-ish. Set the delay sync to 1/8. Bring the feedback down so it's just like one repeat. So that sounds pretty sick as is, but I want to add a little rhythm in. So I'm going to put in some hi-hats, just something on the offbeat. Okay, and then I want to put a little more weird rhythm in that too. So I'm going to go for another set of hi-hats. Get kind of a funky rhythm in here. Okay, now let's process these a little bit. So let's start with the same overdrive trick that I used on the percussion. Put an overdrive on here and then put an LFO on the frequency, except we'll do two different LFOs this time. So let's do the first one to a quarter rate, and then we'll put the second LFO on the width, but we'll do it to 1/3. So it's kind of swishing around a little bit more. And then let's also give this a metallic effect using a Valhalla Freak Echo this time. And let's bring the delay to about 15 milliseconds. Okay, let's hear that with everything. Do one more thing. I'm going to go back into the percussion sound, and I'm going to change the delay to a ping pong to make everything a little bit wider. Cool. So that's pretty much it for the last loop. I'm just going to add in a little chopped up synth loop to make it pop. Yeah, all right. Well, I hope you guys learned something and dug this. Hit me up in the comments. Do the usual, say what's up, make some music, be creative, have fun. Talk to you next time. Goodbye.